Hello dears, today we are going to learn a speech which is made by the famous Irish poet Seamus Heaney, that is crediting poetry. This speech was made by Seamus Heaney by receiving Nobel Prize. Seamus Heaney is a very famous Irish writer who was born in the year 1939 and died in the year 2030. He is considered as one of the major 20th century poets. We know much about the Irish issues and Irish problems. Ireland is divided into Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, a lot of struggles were happened for getting freedom from the UK or the United Kingdom. They wanted to move away from the United Kingdom, whereas the Southern Ireland is remaining a part of the UK. So, Seamus Heaney was born in Northern Ireland and actually he lived in the city or the capital of Northern Ireland, that is Dublin. He studied English at Queen's University in 1957. He has written so many poems, especially 20 volumes of poetry and criticism. He was a Nobel laureate. He received the Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1995. And as a teacher, he taught at Harvard University and served as Oxford Professor of Poetry. These are the main points regarding the famous Dublin poet Seamus Heaney. Let us go through some of the inspirations that happened in his early childhood. He lived in Northern Ireland in a rural farmstead, and it was a very rural place. The people were not at all educated and they were pre-literate. Pre-literate means literature was not at all developed during that period in that place. As a writer, we know that he has developed as a writer. As part of this, he read so many books. At first, he developed his language through radio and poetry. He was a constant reader of poetry, even from his childhood onwards. At that time, he read straightforward and expressive poetry rather than implicit or hidden type of poetry. That is, he was very much interested in straightforward poetry. The meaning should be very clear even at the first reading. Such poems were appreciated or read by Seamus Heaney during his early life. Here are some of the Nobel lecture themes. We have to analyze which are the points that he has pointed out in his Nobel lecture, that is, the lecture or the speech which is made by Seamus Heaney at the time of receiving Nobel Prize. At first, he is telling about his journey from a very rural coterie, that is the name of his house, to Nobel Prize laureate. That is, in the earlier side, we have discussed about the villages or the surroundings in which he has been brought up. That is, it was surely a pre-literate culture or pre-literate crowd in which he has been brought up. So, what was the journey? How it was? Why or how he has been interested in poetry? These are the things that are being discussed in the first part of this speech. Then he is moving about or moving to the importance of language and poetry. How language is very important regarding poetry in order to develop historical consciousness, one should have to develop his or her own language. This is a concept which is put forward by Seamus Heaney in his Nobel laureate speech. Then the third point here, he is telling about poetry, how poetry as a stepping stone to understanding and portraying experiences. We know that he is a very relevant or a very famous poet, Irish poet, and During the course of his life, he has experienced a lot. A lot of experiences were there, and all those experiences were reflected in his poems. How poetry is a mean of expressing one's experience. We know the definition which is made by Wordsworth on poetry, that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of emotions. Once emotions are being poured, or it has been flowed to the paper through pen, that is poetry. In his early poetic career or in his early childhood or youth, he has been influenced by a number of poets. He admired poets like John Keats, G.M. Hopkins, Robert Frost, and Chaucer. These were the poets who inspired Seamus Heaney while writing poems. He was influenced by realism and the village life of Northern Ireland. We know that he was very much influenced by his surrounding, especially his village. At the same time, he was not at all interested in the way of writing of some other poets like Wallace Stevens and Rainer Maria Rilke. Why? He was not interested in these poets because they were very much decorative in their language or in their style of writing poetry. They were not at all expressive. We have already said that Seamus Heaney was very much interested in expressive poetry. He was he was very much interested, or he advocated, or he pleaded for expressive poetry rather than poems which have a lot of decorations or hidden meanings embedded in it. Anyways, in that way or in such a um, manner, he opposed or he struggled with poets like Wallace Stevens and Rainer Maria Rilke. This is just an introduction to Seamus Heaney and his Nobel Prize receiving speech. In the next video, we can continue with the text or the speech. Okay, thank you for listening. Bye bye.